We do continue to follow some breaking news from last night. A Kansas priest arrested, accused of abusing a 6-year-old. That priest is Father Ryan McCandless with the Diocese of Salina. He was taken into custody yesterday in Wichita. The arrest was made by the KBI agents. The agency says Father McCandless was wanted on 3 counts of aggravated indecent liberties with a child. Those charges alleged to have happened in Belleville, Kansas between July and September of last year. The Diocese of Salina suspended McCandless when they were made aware of that incident. He was a pastor at 3 parishes at the time of his removal: St. Edward in Belleville, St. George in Munden, and St. Isidore in Cuba. We reached out to the KBI. They tell us if you have a tip that you want to provide to them about McCandless, you can call their tip line at the number that's there on your screen or submit it anonymously at the website also on your screen.